Alright, this is the generic part of the Burbs. What's the Burbs? It's cookie cutter houses. And honestly, I live in a neighborhood where the houses mostly are different a little bit. So there's my house. Oh, look at that. All the other houses, we'll take a little walk around. Again, my Henry David Thoreau shirt. I went to the woods to live deliberately so that when I die, hopefully, emphasis on hopefully, I don't end up realizing that I never really lived. Uh-oh, as I turn the corner here, I can't really see it. In the distance, there's the sunset, as well as all the other cookie cutter houses. Nothing wrong with it. If there was, I wouldn't be living here. But I'm going to try to do a little video here where this shifts into off the grid, where there's no houses, just trees, just woods, just emptiness. Everyone has some random excuse. Oh, I couldn't do that. Why? Why couldn't you? So I'm not going to try to defend or justify why you can or can't do that, blah, blah, blah. That literally is up to you. I like this fence next to me, though. I have a friend that builds fences within city limits. Famous last words. He always gets into trouble if he goes above 6 feet, because cities have all these weird jurisdictions where you can or cannot do something. But I thought, just for kicks and giggles, it was gonna be too hard to walk the dogs and try to hold this camera. And who knows if some random people come out. What are you doing? And I say, mind your own business. But it is funny, this Friday evening, we finished what you call a AES, annual, what is that? Annual engagement survey, where corporate offices discuss, you know, what they don't like, blah, blah, blah. Well, you could do better and all that stuff. Who cares? It's still funny, though, that at 47, I think the next oldest person, at least my rank, is 10 years younger than me. My boss is maybe not that much younger, 3 or 4 years younger than me. Who cares, right? But it's interesting just looking at some of the statistics here from Financial Samurai, as some people walk by looking at me as like some weirdo. But statistically, the average American household spends $6,500 a month. And it breaks down how, for a single person, the average monthly spend is $4,700 a month. Okay, needless to say, if I break that down, hey, what's the average salary? Okay, it's around 50 grand, a little less than that in this state. But let's just say 50 grand. Okay, there's a pretty big disconnect then on average outcome, what you're spending, versus income. Working for the corporate office, Walmart, little company, biggest company in the world, that would be called a huge deficit. Within that, we'll go through this a little bit later, happily off the grid, where instead of houses everywhere, you're going to see nothing, which becomes much more alluring. The ideal retirement age to minimize regret and maximize happiness. This is the part that will blow you away. And what it does, God forbid, is it actually kind of looks at things like health, right? For my previous video, I just had my first colonoscopy. Thank you, God, it turned out to be good. At least I think. There was a little polyp, but he said, nah, I'm not worried about it. But it ended up being from this survey, it says 44. In a perfect situation, 44 years old is when you should retire. Well, how'd you get to that? That number's nuts. Even if I retire next year, and I say retire, I'm going to still do the barista fire, which obviously I'm going to work and do all that stuff. I'll be 48. And people say, dude, you're nuts. That's too early. Well, according to Financial Samurai, I should retire at 44. Or is it 43, 44? And what it said was, instead of measuring everything by money, it measures it by health also. God forbid, I know. Everything's not by the dollar. And what it's basically saying is, without reading it verbatim, I might do that in the next video, is it's saying, if you're healthy, you have X amount of good years, okay? If you're old and you can't even walk down the effing street, doesn't really matter how much money you have, you're not really going to enjoy it, right? So its point is, taking all things into consideration, 44, I think it's 44, it was 43 or 44. I was shocked that it was that young. They said that's when you should retire, because you've hit the sweet spot of education. Let's say you have whether it be, you know, Votech, like a plumber, or me, like, hey, you got this master's in history, worthless, but let's say it's an MBA, whatever. You've maximized the value of it. You've also worked in the workforce X amount of years. You have, in theory, X amount of years to look forward to. And therefore, to maximize those good years, you should retire at this age. You might not have the most money, but you have this much more health. So it's actually maximizing health and time over strictly dollars, which, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. Again, I know 2025 USA apparently has it all figured out, but let's just, you know, with a master's in ancient and classical history, I know for a fact we shouldn't use presentism, which is judge all of history, past, present, future, by my current demographic and current year. Let's just look more holistically. Like, what did they say 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 20 years ago, and maybe 20 years from now? Well, there's a good chance they're saying that there's a hybrid between time, money, health, effort, all of that. If you went strictly by health, you'd say, well, then I should retire at 18. Okay, nobody's saying that. If you went strictly by money, you should probably retire at like 80. No one's saying that. If you should look at a hybrid, you're going to mix those two. Okay, that makes sense. If you know for a fact you're going to die at 55, you probably shouldn't work till 55. So I've almost went full circle around this block. Some random car coming behind me. Maybe my wife, she's not home yet. But We'll see what happens. Everybody looks at me like I'm a nut when I have this thing out. But I'll finish this up off the grid. Whoa! There we go. I'm sure that's another generic soul wanting to buy more stuff. But think about it, and we'll continue this in a little bit different environment off the grid.